to Series 2 of my podcast, Innervation, where we get to hear stories and experiences of incredible women in science and technology. Not only will you get insights into some fascinating innovations, but you may also even relate to their stories, especially if you're a little unconventional or non-conforming. As with all science and technology, what these women do have a real impact on all of our lives, whether we realise it or not. But here on Innervation, I'm also giving women a platform for them to be heard and for us to be inspired and uplifted by what they've learned along their life journeys. This week, I talked to Halima Bhayat, a STEAM educator.
I'm Halima Bhayat. I work in the Southwest London School for Girls. I'm head of computing faculty as well as senior leader for STEAM. So that's my kind of job role all in all. I also lead on the T-levels, digital T-levels, which the government have been talking a lot about in their new budgets. So in terms of my job role, that's what I do. My biggest role as part of that is to encourage girls, especially from ethnic minority communities, to be taking on STEAM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, maths and arts. And I feel that I'm their role model to kind of help and guide them through that journey.
Why has it been so important to encourage girls into STEAM, in your opinion?
Generally, there isn't many girls who are going into these subjects. It's important because they need to understand that if you are not there, there's no one else there to represent you. So if we've got a lack of women at the moment currently in this industry, anything which is being developed, there isn't a woman's view in it, really. There isn't the perspective, especially with ethnic minorities as well. How do we know that that medication will suit a certain person? How do we know that a woman will be able to perform something or do something, and I feel it's really important that women need to be part of this, because if they want their voices to be heard, they want products to be built for themselves, they want it to be something that they could be understood as, they need to be part of this. And I still feel there are general typical views of what or a person looks like or who they should be in these careers and these jobs. And I feel that gender sort of idea is what we need to go past, and that's why I feel women should be as part of that. I also have my own personal reasons, to be honest, as well. Going through a community myself in the BAME community, seeing what it was like myself going through the journey, going into STEAM, into teaching, but also other friends that I had, other family, community members I knew. I just only wish for some people that they were part of STEAM, because they would be in such a better place than where they are now. There are still, unfortunately, things that do happen, especially coming from an Asian African community background myself, to women, stereotypical views of what jobs you should be doing, because that's where it's high paid, or what you should do. But actually, we need to understand as a society, very importantly, that the jobs we're doing now are not going to exist in the future. We can't all just be lawyers or doctors or do nothing, get married and have children. It is important we have understanding, even if we're not in that job, of how the system works, because come to the future, we're going to have to program things. We're going to have to do things ourselves and not just depend on going to a shop which may not exist, or it may not be a doctor, it may be someone else. So we need girls in this field so that they could be valued, they could be part of what is being built, and it is made for them and not just for anybody.
Yeah, I must say, like, I have been surprised and shocked to see the homogeneity in companies. You know, a lot of teams are very homogenous, and that's carried on for a long time. And so it's really encouraging to see women like you encouraging more girls into STEM subjects. What's your background? Like, how did you get into STEM and why?
So I myself, I studied in a inner city school. My parents were not, especially my mum, she didn't speak English. I went through school myself. I struggled quite a bit, not going to disagree with that. One of the reasons I struggled was also because of my dyslexia. I am dyslexic, but my school didn't actually find that I had that until I got to university. But I've always been strong spirited, and I've always gone against the no. So if somebody said, you can't do it, I have made sure I've done it. So as part of my background, I went into computer science, funnily enough, because there was a teacher who actually did kind of say to me that, you can't fix that, or you can't do that, so don't tell me what to do. And I don't know what it was, something all of a sudden kind of crept, well, I can do it, and give me a chance, and I can work with computers. I mean, computers weren't necessarily a full classroom at the time. It was one computer between a whole class. You know, it still was uprising at the time. But at the same time, with my dyslexia, I kind of formed this relationship with working with machines, as I felt that this is where my support was actually coming from. If I needed help on research, if I needed help with my spelling, I kind of became attached to it. And I thought, well, why not? I'm going to go into computer science. And if lots of women don't want to do it, which they didn't, it was predominantly boys, I'm going to go into it because someone does, because if they don't, no one else in the future is going to move forward. And that's why I felt it was important. And my background kind of went into that, studied computer science. I then decided I'm going to go into teaching because I wanted to share my knowledge with others and get others to follow and study the subject at the same time. Hence, I went into teaching and then led into masters and so on. But this is where my kind of passion for STEAM has come. Also, my passion has come from seeing Asian women, seeing specifically those who may get married but don't necessarily go on to work, but have got degrees or masters or PhDs or something like that. And there are also times where some women have come out of education to get married. I've seen that as well. So they've not had a full education service because they've had to have arranged marriages or something. And they've then gone out and struggled. And it was that struggle I saw and thought, you know, families with larger populations living in homes, STEAM is where the money is at. That is what you need to study. Because if you have problems with your spouses or your family or your friends, who is going to support you? There are charities out there. It's not as easy to access. Some charities are quite easy. I mean, it's more free now. You can hear about more charities now, but you didn't in those days. And I guess my passion came because I wanted to help women in my culture, in my generation, my ethnicity, and those girls to open and understand Yes, you may live in houses with lots of people, but look at what there is out there. Look at what you can do. How are you going to self-support yourself? And STEAM fits into that. Not only you're looking at 5, 6 subjects, but this is your life, and that's what I saw when I saw in STEAM. I had to go out to learn about things like physical bodies. So I became a fitness instructor. I wanted to learn about food. So I went in and I studied about food and became cake decorator and lots of things. I studied things myself because I didn't have it given to me. And I didn't necessarily have a role model there to see someone to work to. So I felt I'm going to do it all. And I'm going to try and do all these things. And when you look at it, STEAM fitted into everything. So specifically, as I say, with women, especially those women who are being abused or don't have their way, where are they going to go? These subjects are going to help them because it will grant them and guarantee a job at the end of it. And that's what was so important to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely clear that engineering and other STEAM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths, they all could really benefit from having more women in their industries. And, you have that strong will to teach yourself, to say, to prove the naysayers wrong. But it's been really difficult for women to break through. And I think one of the things that I'm starting to see is that women have found it typically difficult to break through, but also underrepresented people and minority groups have found it difficult to break through because they're not understood. Have you had any experiences of just not being given a chance to be understood, like to be heard, to be seen?
Most definitely. I mean, my own career, which is the teaching profession, not my current school, can I just say, they've been brilliant and they've provided me opportunities. But in the past, I have. Number one, because as you can see, I wear a scarf, I'm a Muslim. I've had that as well. So I've had racism. I've been told to look around and told, why should I be in a leadership team? Because the parents and the school don't want to see a brown person. So I've had racially, I've been told that. I've been told to go and look for jobs in East London. I predominantly have worked in white schools where there is majority white population, and I've deliberately done that to fight back at the nose. As a woman, being told, well, why are you going to get this opportunity? You're only going to have a baby and then disappear. Then you haven't got time to do all that. So yes, in my own profession, and I'm talking about a teaching profession, I haven't even got into the private sector, which is the engineering, what happens outside there is actually happening. So I still feel that we're moving forward, but we are still a long way from actually accepting what a role is for a woman in industry. And it's funny to think this because coming in the World War II, mainly it was women who were not far from London in Surrey, in Bletchley Park. They were the ones who were working. The men were out in the army. They were not sitting in the kitchens. They were not cooking. So it's kind of a question of what's happened between that time and now. And I also look at what we're looking at STEAM today, and I look at the technology industry specifically. And when I'm out there, I'm talking to girls or students about Facebook and social media and all the rest of it. But I then look back and I think, well, actually, reading some of the autobiographies and watching the movies about some of these famous technology men, should I say, actually, they didn't serve very well to the women. They're not really good models. I mean, off the back of it, we are there. We've got Yahoo, we've got Google, but actually, if we look back at the history, how it started, I mean, Facebook obviously started there. It was to rate women. It started because they weren't, Zach was not happy with his girlfriend. It started, they wanted to rate the girls. And that was where social media in that instance was created. But look at it now. We don't look at it in that way. So it's interesting to see how industry has started. And I think that has something to play with the part of why women are a bit more fearful as to what to do, but also the idea, people telling them, you can't do that. It's not a woman's job. You're not able to do that. And we need to stop saying we can't, because unless somebody tries, you don't know if they can or can't, in my opinion. And I think that's where we still have that stigma. And I think we are starting to accept there are more women now who have started to go into the STEAM industry, coming from ethnic minorities, but we do have that job. We have that job as for parents as well, coming from my perspective. If they see people like me, they then look at their own daughters and say, actually, do you know what? You can do this subject, you can do that. But if they don't see yourself or me or others in this job, they just typically go back to how things are, because the amount of people, how many first generations do we still have living in this country? I think there's a whole load of stats there to be studied, which gives us clues as to what is happening in the communities, and specifically for women. Why is it? And I think this is why, for me as well, it's important in the job I do. You have to start early. If we don't start educating our girls early, they're not going to be that strong, independent women come towards the end and challenge people, because they can't challenge them as they don't know what they've not seen. And they're fearful of going into that, knowing what's going to happen. And that's where we need to look at actually what is going on here.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about social media, because I am not 100% certain why Facebook was started, but regardless, social media does seem to be a platform that's very superficial. Everything is about the way people look. There's a lot of content which really objectifies women. And, when you look at sort of the Kardashians, for example, they've got like hundreds of millions of followers. And, it is very much about the superficial. And if there were more women driving those technologies, perhaps they wouldn't be platforms to objectify women. And that's, just one of the many reasons why more women should be in technology. Do you have any sort of, with your experiences, can you suggest any kind of ways that are effective in increasing diversity and inclusion and equality amongst minorities in communities?
I think, first of all, as employers, it's very important, if you do have people coming from these communities, such as myself, there is encouragement and not the opposite way, because obviously I've had encouragement and I've clearly got to where I have. I think that's the first step. I think it's important that people see them, because when you see them, it's there. Now, for me, my classroom itself, in schools, they usually have seating plans and so on. I don't do it like that. I have 31 women as mouse mats that are my seats, and that woman has that seat within STEAM. And I've tried to make sure that to encourage the girls, I've had 40 girls, more than that now. I've now got 56 girls moving on from that who have done computer science, and it's not heard of across the country. But for me, it was important that when you come in from the outside, there are images, there are pictures, there are quotes encouraging them to come in. And the women I picked were either girls, they were dead or alive, or come from different genders, different communities, religious, non-religious, colored, non-colored. And it was for them to see that everybody counts and not just one particular person there. Now, I know that your question was more to the minorities. It is when the minorities see you that this is encouraged. So the other part is that if you are in a role and you are doing a job which is, is successful, go out and share it with others. For me, I'm also part of a computing community across the UK. In fact, I support some schools abroad as well. And it's through that, doing talks, lectures, as here, which is going to be posted, people listening to you, finding out that you do exist is important, because then you could be used to talk to others about it and get them to help to understand. I think it's also important that employers need to get someone in. My school here, in fact, we got somebody to come in to teach us about racism, what racism is, what words are used, how it works with students and staff. And we had about 4 days, consecutive days, sort of like of training just on this part, on sexism, on racism, and lots of other topics. And it's important to keep up to date. What does it mean? If we say Black Lives Matter, what does it mean? Is it a political party, which some people are not aware of? They just believe I'm following something to support people. And I think it's having those facts and knowing about the facts. That's what's important. And although social media started off, it's not started off in any way to kind of encourage those women, but it's funny how it's now turning the wheel, and you'll find lots of women out there who are actually, in fact, they're using social media as a job in itself, you know, and as I said, the jobs we're doing now are not going to exist in the future, but it's about sharing your word, being involved in talks, going out, giving lectures to people, sharing resources. So I've got lots of lessons, for instance, teaching other schools during lockdown who were not able to give resources to parents or children how to teach them due to COVID. You can find my recordings and parents can learn themselves and students can learn from it. I think it's that important goal is seeing somebody is the first step. Seeing someone of a different color, ethnicity, race is the first step. And when that's there in place, it's about making sure that they are seen by others. And I think that's what's important. And that's when we can start encouraging people through the door and having them. And for yourselves as well, such as myself, I can speak many languages, having that communication with those people outside my gates, whether I know them or not, does not matter. If you see someone there, say, how are you? So what are you doing? You know, how have you thought about doing this? And actually sharing with them where they can go for support, where they can go for help, what they can do. I think that's the most important bit, because I do find that in these communities, the women are strong. They really want to go out, but they don't know who to go to or what to do. So I think having the presence is the most important part.
What's your background? Like, can you give me a very quick synopsis of like where you've lived and like your sort of educational experiences?
So as I come from the Midlands itself, so although I'm in London today, so originally I'm from the Midlands. I went to like an inner city school. To be honest, when I used to leave school, there used to be quite a lot of drug dealings going on. Girls were used as, there were a number of girls who were kind of used as a sex symbol for various years, sexually harassed, etc. So that was going on at that time. And I kind of stayed away from that, shall I say. So I've probably been the most successful one of the most successful ones coming out from school there. And it was that community I lived in. I would walk past, you would see prostitutes on the day, working around. And that kind of it was the life of, you will get married, you will kind of have children, and that needs to be your focus. I think that was the main part that's kind of iterated with many people, although there was encouragement there, yeah, you can work, you can do that, but it was never forgotten that no, you are going to get married, you're going to have children, you're going to have to kind of live with it. And regardless of what your husband's like, you stick with him. And that's how it is. And the woman does everything, she serves, and that's kind of how it is. So I come from that background, and when I did marry for love. I didn't marry anyone from my community. I've married for love. It's been absolutely brilliant. My husband has never stopped me from anything. In fact, he's encouraged me, and there have been times where he's dropped down in terms of his career to allow me to pursue my career, to do that. And I think it's important to have a spouse that is able to understand you and to have that balance. I feel fortunate to have that. And in terms of background, that's where I come. My mother herself is from Africa. So she was from Mozambique, Africa herself. She couldn't speak English. I did see her through her life going through very, very dependent on my father, because he spoke English and he was from here. And he had family from his previous wife as well. And it was through my mother's experience that I saw things and felt also things need to be a bit different here. And if there's somebody else in her situation, what do I do? Well, if my mother had that STEAM education, she may not be as dependent on a spouse. She would be able to do things on her own. She would be able to find sources and resources. And not forgetting, when we go into employment in these industries, we make friends with those around us, and we meet more and more people, as I've met yourself, and we connect and we link through that way. So my background kind of comes from there, studying computer science as a degree, going on to do teaching at Warwick. I then went on to doing a master's leading change in education at Queen Mary's. And from that, I've rose, but it's not been easy for me because, as I said, I've had racism and sexism and disability discrimination all against me since my time working in teaching. And it's taken me longer. I've been 15 years in teaching. So it's taken that long to actually get to a position where I am now, that, you know, in the last sort of few years, which it shouldn't. And you do notice it. You do notice it as a minority with people around you, because you end up helping, supporting, training others, but that opportunity never comes. So at least at one particular point in my career, at least I was told something which was truth, which I'd rather bear than be told, oh, no, you're not ready for that job yet. Oh, no, you're not there yet. You need to still do this. You still need to do that. At least at one point I was told, even though it was racism, that, look, we can't accept a brown person because you can't be the face for our company or our organization, as they can't see you, as that's not what they accept. So, yeah, I come from that kind of a background. And as I said, from my family itself, I wanted to teach myself more. I wanted to know about living, because my mom she did used to do all the cooking, everything kind of for me, because she was very for women and getting me educated and getting me out there, noticed and seen. My dad was more traditional. You stay in the house, you do this. When are you going to do this? She's never going to learn to cook. She's never going to be able to do this, and you shouldn't do this. And unfortunately, we had barriers around him who were also encouraging that, because that's how the culture and society was. And that's where I kind of would do things. And I would be working. Sometimes I had 4 jobs going at the same time, until you make sure that I'm living off my own wages and not off my parents' wages. Working, as I said, trained myself. So behind the scenes, as well as being a teacher, I would go to evening classes. And for so many years, I trained myself as an instructor, trained myself to be a cake decorator, trained myself to work in catering, trained myself in so many different aspects of my career, because I wanted to make sure that I always had a job and I was independent and not dependent on other people. And it was very important for me to see that in my spouse as well, before I did get married to my husband, to make sure that that continues. And that's what I want to embed and see outside with those that I teach. And that's why I went into teaching, because I could have worked in industry, but I chose not to, and not to have that higher pay, to work where I am, because it is the girls. The girls have to see these people. They need to hear this. And I do talk to them about this, because they need to know that we are all living and life goes on. What do you do when you walk out the gates? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to study? What if you do get approached by a guy? What are you going to do about that? Things like that. It's having those skills and being confident enough to speak out. Because if we don't, we're going to be left with what we have been previously left with. And that's what's important to me. And that's why I'm spreading the word, not just across work, but as I said, I do work across the UK, and I do work, if there are schools abroad that may need support, so on, I support them. I specifically specialize in my subject, which is computer science, as well as STEAM, and help other schools to know how they can do STEAM in their own schools, and getting organizations to work with us. So getting partnering companies to work with us and come in and give talks and do workshops, and giving them opportunities to do work experience. I also go out and look for places that students can work as well, to make sure that they have something to move on to.
What's it like being you?
For being me, it's about not really being, I feel like I can't really be off guard. If I'm being honest, that's the first thing. I can't be off guard. I need to be alert, and I need to always be in there, because I still feel if something does occur outside of my workplace or within workplace, I've got to be able to back up myself 100%. I need to also make sure staying alert also means that the students I'm teaching, they have always got the facts and the latest information, and that is not easy to do. That involves a lot of myself working on social media with companies, talking to people outside. So it's a lot of my time. So to be me also means I have to give. I have to be out there a lot, finding people, sourcing people, finding out who they are, knowing about their stories, and getting them to share those stories. For me, it's also about making sure my own children, because I do have children, growing up and seeing somebody who is a strong person so that they can also be strong. So for me, as I said, I think to be me, it's about making sure I'm not of God, and I am there. I am resilient, which I am in general, but to make sure that I'm there for people to see it in that way. And that can be quite difficult sometimes, because there are highs and lows that you do have in life, but it's about making sure your highs are shown more than the lows.
Yeah, because when I hear about, you went to school in the Midlands and there were girls that were nothing like you, and then you were a minority in computer science. What would you want people to know about your experiences being you, so that you can widen people's perspectives about the people you represent?
I would say that you need to go out and you need to find things. So the way I've lived and the way I've come to where I have is because I've done it all myself. I've done it all myself, but I have had support by finding people. And I think that's what's important. Don't ever let others say something to you which you're not sure about and accept it. You need to be able to be proactive and find out, is that the truth? And you have to actually think about things analytically. And I think that's where you can be successful. Don't just trust a person. You need to be able to find things around them and know what is going on, what is the fact, where I can go, and that's how you can find it. So, for example, as I said, there are now many charities that are out there to support you. There are many people out there, for instance, as ourselves from LinkedIn, as I found from the award ceremony I had attended, and I was the teacher I was in the professions category. And I've made my links through that. And it's about making links and you need to go out there. So if you're going to be in a house all day, you're going to be cooking, you're going to be looking after your siblings, or you're going to be doing something else, it doesn't work. You've got to be out there. Even if you do look after your siblings, you go to school and you go and get them out, talk to those other parents, talk to those people around, because you never know what they're doing or where they're going or what their profession is. Be independent, take the bus, take the train, take something and travel somewhere that you don't know about, open the doors and discover what is there, is what I'm going to say. And that's how I've done it. When I came to London, that was the first thing I did. I didn't know what was in certain places or certain tube stations. I went there. I just thought, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes just going out there and I'm going to have a look. My job in itself, I work, but I don't get the opportunity to always go out. Normally what I do is after work, I have in the past, I would go for a walk around the whole area just to see what the dynamics are like. What do the houses look like? How do people walk? So it's about analyzing behavior that helps you to understand how to behave back, but find those and sourcing them and being independent. I think independence is the big one. Don't just depend and rely on them, not even your nearest and dearest. You need to be able to be proactive and go out there and find out what's going on and challenge people around you, because by challenging is where we're going to find out what the truth is and what is out there for us.
When I listen to you speak, I hear someone who's really strong and really courageous. But as someone who is in a minority, how do you, well, maybe you don't, but do you feel held back? And if so, how?
I feel held back one of the ways I do feel held back, I feel like possibly people still probably do see me as my identity and where I come from, that, oh, she may not know as much. And I'll tell you why. It's more outside of work, actually. I didn't start wearing the hijab until after I went on a pilgrimage to Hajj. Now, there's no compulsory thing to say you have to wear a hijab after Hajj. I decided to make a change and do that myself. And I started noticing changes in behaviors. So although there was a change of behavior, I've grown up being a brown person all my life, and I've experienced it. And then talking to people who are not brown, I've realized, okay, there's slightly something different here. I'm being treated a bit different or being spoken to a bit different. But when I started to wear the hijab, I noticed a lot more respect within the community there, and wanting to follow and listen to me. But outside of the community, if I was sitting on the tube, I think a woman tried to attack me once. It was literally because of the fact that I was Muslim. It was also quite horrible coming from work, especially when the bombing had happened in France, with the whole cartoon thing that had occurred, and sitting on the tube. I vividly remember people sitting around with the newspapers printed all over, giving me the strange look, or trying to look at my bag. Have I got a bomb in there? Or trying to, and I think it's more of the people's views. They really don't feel that I'm educated. They really don't feel I'm higher up compared to where I am. So unless I share and say, actually, I'm a senior leader, they don't really think as much of me. And I see this when I go into exhibitions as well. So I know there's a big exhibition for education coming up soon, the Bet Show, which I regularly visit. And I remember one particular year going in and actually thinking, oh, okay, let me go and have a look at this. It's the Saudi Arabia school. I'm interested to know what the abroad schools do. And went there, but never thought anything about it. And I was totally ignored because I was a woman. And because I looked Asian, they didn't even bother wanting to give me time, not knowing what my role was and what I could have done or where I could have been. So I still do see this, or I've been to job interviews and I don't think they're expecting the person behind to look like me. And I think it's more the way I look that I feel sometimes that kind of does it. Not to say that I'm going to change in any way, but it is sad because I do feel sometimes the more clothing I have on, people almost feel like the more kind of closed I want to be. And I'm not a very closed person, as you can tell. As talking to yourself, I'm quite an open person and happy to discuss information. So that's how I kind of feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tricky because there are so many initiatives trying to encourage diversity and inclusion, particularly from corporates who really want to tick that box. But it's not enough to just hire from a more diverse and inclusive pool. Like, I feel like something needs to happen beyond that, where people are encouraged and supported. So with that in mind, like, what have you experienced? I know you've kind of touched on it, but like, what has really been the most impactful experiences that really have encouraged your ability to thrive as an underrepresented person?
It is the finding other people and talking to them. So being part of a community, specifically as I am more now with women who come from my community, and talking and finding out about their successes and what they've had to do and how to do it, that has encouraged me in order to be better at what I'm doing, or better at what I'm doing, but also finding out, opportunities. There is a careers opportunity that you can move on to over here, or would you like to come and help me and do something here to help someone else? And I think it's very important to have that strong link, because communities are stronger when they are together. You will notice still, if you still go into East London as an example, there is majority still their Bangladeshi community, and they do help each other. If somebody needs housing, if somebody needs looking for a spouse, somebody has a problem with some, they kind of help each other. But what we don't have, as you have pointed out here, is the women in that minority community who want to work, who want to go out, who want to be independent. And that's the community we need to create and encourage. And that is the community that's been supporting me. So I've had those who are not in my community, but well, have you thought about this, Halima? Have you spoken to so-and-so? Have you done this? Or made you realize that, hold on a second, you were having this conversation with so-and-so. Did you know that actually they weren't very nice to you, or they were very nice and they're actually saying this to you? It's about someone spelling out to you. Sometimes you need someone to spell out to you, this is what you need to do. And that's what I think you need. We need somebody out there. We need people out there to spell out and actually say, do you know, what are you sitting there doing? Have you thought about actually doing this? Have you done it? Let me go and get that contact for you and give it to you. Just speak to them and see what you think. And that's what we need. That's the community we need, so that we can kind of hop on to each other as communities do, because that is what the spirit, and it's not just about physical communities anymore. It is about those communities in social media, talking to those around the world and find out how a woman like you in India might be like, or in Brazil might be like, or in America might be like, and what are they doing? Because you never know, the world is so small. You may not be here tomorrow, you might be somewhere else tomorrow, but that's because somebody has felt it to you and has provided that vision to you. And it's about having the vision. And for me, it's about, as I've gone through my career, it's finding those visions. It doesn't just happen. You have to find these people and you have to find them. And that's the part that's the trickiest, I think, finding the people. How do you know who to go to and what to do?
Well, I feel like listening to you, you're actually being what it is that you're searching for, which is why you're such a perfect guest on innovation, because I feel like sometimes we have to trailblaze and be pioneers. And, you know, with that said, what has been the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or a piece of advice that you give to others?
I think from my perspective, I've probably given from that advice, first of all, which is that you need to go out and search. You can't just depend on what people say to you. You need to know exactly who, what, where, and why. You need to make friends. You need to find those people, even if it's a brief 5 seconds or 5 minutes. You don't know what that person's going to give you, and never judge them, because that could be where your spelling out comes from and it leads you to other things. So search and market yourself out there. The piece of advice I've been given is literally the never to give up. You have got confidence, Halima. You can go further. You can do things and be independent. And it's that advice of somebody actually reassuring and telling you you can do things. And we forget that sometimes, we forget ourselves, to be honest, because we're so drawn around other people. It's important with all this well-being and mental awareness going on. Your self-care is the most important. If you're not going to be there, others are not going to be able to get your support. So for my family, if I'm ill, my husband and my children are going to suffer, you know. But if I'm strong and somebody else gets ill, I'm there to be stronger for them. But at the same time, as I said, looking after yourself, making sure you're their support. If you feel stress, how do you deal with it? I go to the gym or something, you know. So it's important. And sometimes I think people do forget that when they do look at me as well, they think, okay, she does a lot for people out there. And I do a lot, and I know that. But at the end of the day, it's also important for me to make sure I am well looked after, because if I am not here, there's no one else who's like me. And that's the same with anyone else who's watching this now, or anyone there listening to this, is that if you're not here, you've got to think about yourself, or make a list, sit down and make a list. If I'm not here, what is not going to happen? And the fact that I am here, what is happening? And that's really important, because that is what mentally keeps you going. Because if I'm here, this is what is happening, and this will continue to happen. But if I'm not here, surely these things can't happen, because there's no one else out there who's going to be able to do that. And that's what's important, I think, to keep yourself going and engage. And as I said, with innovation and so on, if you don't have people out there who's going to invent that for you, there's no one else that's going to invent it. So be the inventor yourself. And we are living in such a decade where you can create your own future. You can create your own things, coming from computing myself, coding. I remember listening to a talk on on BBC Radio 4 once, where they were talking about in India and a government, there were lots of people sitting there coding. The government employed them. They had no idea what was going on there, but they had the freedom, and they were not dictated to and told what to do, because they didn't understand the technology. So it's important for our women to go out there, because you've got an advantage right now. And in fact, not just an advantage, there seems to be a labeling system I also find right now. Oh, we have to have a woman. We have to make sure there's a Chinese. We have to make sure there's a Black. We've got to make sure there's an Asian. We've got just to show that we have diversity. And you know what? When we have photographs, they're going to be in our photographs. But what I'm going to encourage and say to people is look beyond that, which is what I've done. I was in photographs all the time, but look beyond that. Take it to your advantage. Anything that happens, even if it's bad, take it to your advantage, because they're not going to get somebody like you They need you just as much as you need them. So take it as an advantage and move yourself further as quick as you can.
Well, it has been so amazing to talk to you. It's crazy because I do come from an industry of media where it so is like a two-dimensional judgment, the surface, what people look like. And what's been incredible about talking to you today is just the amount of passion and depth you have, which people would not see if their minds are not open to get past the way you look. And in talking to you today, it really just confirms why it's so important to have these conversations. And you have really reinforced the purpose of innovation, I have to say, because it's just been so enlightening talking to you. I feel like a light bulb has been switched on, and it's been such a privilege to learn about your past and your kind of your ethos and your ambition. So thank you so much for opening up and being so honest with me today.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely there, helpful. And I do hope, I'm sure there's going to be things that viewers are going to be able to pick up from the conversation today. But the main thing is to be strong. And as I said, negative is not usually a negative. There is a positive in there. We may feel it's negative, but actually there's something better to come. And that's what we need to be ready for. And we need to make sure we take advantage of it.
Thanks for listening, and please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review it if you can. The more ratings and reviews, then the more interest from those trusty algorithms, which could help to increase the reach of this show. And you can watch the video recording of this conversation on YouTube on my new series, Esteemed. It's all about self-discovery, self-evolution, and inclusivity on innovation. So let's just all strive to be the best versions of ourselves and celebrate others being themselves too. As always, be kind and loving, and I wish you all a great week.